Hi everyone. If you've been watching my last couple of videos, you'll know I've had some setbacks on the layout lately, but I thought what I could do at least is have a quick layout update just so that you can see where I have been making some progress in the last few weeks. Alright, so welcome back to the train room everybody, and before I share with you where I've made some real progress in the last few weeks, I just wanted to reassure you that the helix project hasn't been entirely abandoned. Although it's proved far more complex than I was first hoping, I'm slowly working my way through to envisaging a solution, but I've had to put it on hold for two reasons. One, quite simply because it was kind of doing my head in, and that was having a negative impact on the whole layout in many ways. So as you'll see, I've gone back to some things like doing some scenery, which is always my favourite pastime on the railway. But the second thing is because I've got a big work trip coming up next week. I'm going to say a bit more about that at the end of today's video. But it made no sense really to try and get started on this project until I'm back from that. But just to give you an idea, you can see here that the helix is now sitting down beneath the portion of the layout where I'd intended to fit it. Some of this you won't be able to see very well from this one shot, but I'll blend in some close-ups over the top. The idea was that the helix, the spiral of it, would connect with where there is currently this 8% grade dropping down from the main level of the layout, the main deck, and would then come down to this level and allow trains to be stored that way. I don't think that's going to work for a number of reasons, not least, as I've already shared with you, just because of the issue of the framework bracing that deck. But what I'm just beginning to think might be the better solution for all sorts of reasons is to shift the helix into that far corner, maybe even take 1/2 rotation off the helix, so that I use a small amount of the existing drop. I probably ease the gradient a little bit to then turn in that corner, and that would allow then, with a 1/2 rotation taken away, that would then allow trains to be stored along this length instead, which is probably much easier in terms of access anyway. So that's my thinking at the moment. When I'm back from my trip, I'll start getting my head around how that works in practice. But as I say, just to reassure you, the project hasn't gone away, it's just kind of on hold. Okay, so the first thing to show you in this month's video is some new acquisitions. Just get this last one out of the box. I've picked all of these cars up second-hand. A couple from Tom P, who lives in the area, others from eBay, and a couple from Rails of Sheffield. People living in the UK will know all about Rails and how good they are. One or two of them have got just a small amount of weathering done, I think, by the previous owners. To be fair, one or two others had the odd little defect, maybe sort of bars for door mechanisms just broken in one or two places, and one of the bulkhead end pieces was loose. But I'll fire up this loco and shift the position of the camera so that you can see each of these in turn as they roll by. Okay, so I had to change locos, a bit embarrassing, and I've muted now 53, 56, so that we can look first of all at a pair of Walther's plastic hopper cars with the reporting mark NAHX. I want to do some weathering on these and some cool graffiti that I've spotted. And then that's followed by a BC Rail bulkhead flat. That's the one where I had to just do a little bit of remedial work on it. After that we have a pair of TTX boxcars. One is an Athern 60-foot boxcar, the other one an Exact Rail combo door boxcar, which I hadn't seen before. And then coming up at the rear, just sliding through now, a pair of 16,000 gallon chemical cars for Univar Corporation upstairs on the shelf layout. So I'll have to get on and weather all of those better than they are at the moment. Like I say, one or two. I've got a very small amount of weathering applied by a previous owner. In actual fact, I have bought a few other cars, but I'm not going to show those to you now today, simply because they've been bought specifically for a couple of the new industries that I'm working on at the moment. I've mentioned before that I'm exploring the option of a recycled glass plant, as well as some kind of paper mill or cardboard manufacturing mill or something like that. So it won't be too difficult to work out what kind of cars we're talking about. And while we're talking about weathering, I can't remember whether in my last update I mentioned that these two cars, which I'd purchased earlier in the summer, I had finished weathering. The one on the right with the reporting marks FURX, I think is a grain car. In fact, I think they're both grain cars. And I tried quite a simple weathering technique on there because I found it quite difficult to do very simple weathering. But the one on the left was a bit more of a project. Originally a Northern Pacific car, and I just gently scraped the old logo away, did a lot of patching and graffiti, and then lettered this one with a reporting code of RILX 223087, and that's just a bit of fun. RILX is now my fictitious car leasing firm, Roberts Interstate Leasing, because I couldn't find any picture that showed these Northern Pacific cars with any sort of modern reporting marks, so I just made it on my own. So just in case I hadn't shared that with you before, those two are complete as well. Hopefully the others that I've shown you in this segment will, over the course of the autumn now, be weathered up to a similar standard. But that's enough of that for now. Let's pop back upstairs to the Aspen Grove shelf layout, where I'll talk a bit more about some of the scenic work I've been doing up there. Okay, so we're in Aspen Grove, and it's the whole area left of the currently scenic portion which I wanted to focus on. You might remember I had added this extension a good couple of months ago, and it's just been bare boards up until now. So I figured it was high time to fix the track permanently in position and then start some basic groundwork and scenic work. So clearly I've shot this over a few days, but once the track was properly glued in place, I did some contouring with some polyfiller spackle, and then did my usual mix of basic ground cover consisting of a layer of bog standard brown emulsion paint, into which I sprinkled my patented mix of paving sand, dirt from the back garden, fine chinchilla dust, and all sorts of bits of crap, basically, just to make a sort of a random mix of relatively small granules, which is my base layer for all of my scenic work. Usually the emulsion itself, the latex paint, does a fairly good job of just giving enough grab to keep the groundwork in position, but I generally give it an overspray of some IPA alcohol, and then the tried and tested technique of drizzling on some thinned down wood glue. Weirdly, this time it came out in a very strange sticky solution. It didn't really kind of flow as well as usual. I think maybe I got an extra hard grab wood glue, or maybe because I accidentally, I don't know, did I get something which was an exterior grade wood glue? I'm not sure, but it did just make it all a little bit more tricky than usual, but no matter. In the end, it did the intended job of just making sure that the basic layer now for all my subsequent scenic work is absolutely rock solid. So once everything had solidified, I worked my way through the track work, just painting the sides of the rails a kind of standard rusty red. I like to use one of the Tamiya paints for this sometimes, not always. I like a bit of variety, but the Tamiya NATO brown is this nice reddish brown colour, not too garish, but I find it quite convincing. And typically I allow some of that colour just to sort of drop onto the ties as well, because there's going to be a bit more colour variation there. But certainly painting the rails makes a huge difference to the level of realism of the track work. So I was quite pleased with how that came out. And once that had dried off, I decided it was time to get a first basic layer of grass down on the area, using my trusty static grass applicator. Here, just a patchy first cover of 2mm. The usual technique, some dabs of wood glue, watered down a little bit, but trying to keep the glue reasonably patchy, before working over the whole area with the applicator, using the grounding pin, of course, because that's the bit that seems to get the fibres excited, so that when they land they are upright. And I always find this first stage a little bit underwhelming, because it's all if you'll forgive the pun, it's all a little bit weedy. It doesn't really seem to have body to it, but that's precisely because I've got to have some more layers and things yet. Anyhow, it went down quite nicely. I've also added some areas which might yet be sort of other gravel parking lots and things. Not sure how effective this close-up slow motion shot is, but hopefully you can see how the fibres are attracted to the surface and stay upright as they land. It's magic, really. Really has made such a big difference to the way we approach the landscaping of our layouts. Okay, so we've had 24 hours for everything to dry off. I've given the area a bit of a vacuuming and temporarily at least put some vegetation in place in the foreground as well as against the backdrop. And it's certainly quite a transformation. I'm pretty happy with how it's coming together. There's still plenty to do, as always. There's going to be another layer yet of the basic grass covering. I want to put extra sort of gravel and things on these areas where there's kind of some open space. And coming to the back here, obviously I have to now get on with some of the structures. The overpass, a nondescript little industrial building, which I think is going to be a hot tub dealer. And then an Atlas kit of an electricity substation, which you've probably seen knocking around in the background of various videos for a good 3 or 4 years. I bought it very early on to go down in what became the sort of north end of Fairview. It never quite fitted. I've tried it in a couple of other places and I think it's found its permanent home. So it's got to be fixed because a couple of parts have got broken in the last couple of years. And then here, as well as other areas, there's got to be fencing put up. I've got an electricity company vehicle which can be posed there and so on and so forth. But for a couple of nights of work, as you can see, the maintenance of Waygang are just doing some finishing off, but it's all come together pretty nicely. Quite happy with that. I want to try and get the whole of the layout up to this standard. There are still a few bare patches knocking around down in the main garage and here on the shelf layout, but that's looking pretty good. One other thing I'd done was just print off a new street scene to go at the back of North Stanley Street here. Trimmed it to shape and that's looking quite nice as well. So it's all really beginning to come together quite nicely in this corner of the layout. If I just pan round a little bit, it doesn't help that the lighting is a bit hit and miss in this corner of the room. That's something else I'm going to have to just sort out eventually. But yeah, that's all looking pretty good. So I've just put the camera back on a tripod for a minute while I round off today's video. I hinted at the start that I had a trip coming up. and the news is really quite exciting because actually later this week, in fact probably by the time I upload this and you watch it, I'll actually be in the United States and then Canada for a work trip. Now that's really exciting. I don't get the chance to cross over to North America all that often. And yes, of course, because it's for work, I might just sort of struggle a little bit to find some free time, but rest assured, I'm going to make sure that I have some railroad fun both in the US and in Canada while I'm over there. I've got a couple of visits planned, and I hope as well maybe to be able to do just 1 or 2 quick rail fanning trips as well. So that's really exciting. It means I'm quite sure that by the time I'm back in early October, I'll have lots of new goodies to share with you. So thank you as always for watching. I'm sure you know the deal by now. I'd really appreciate a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed and you'd like to follow along with the progress I'm making on the layout, then please do click on the subscribe button as well. Any comments you want to leave as well, much appreciated. I always try my hardest to answer any queries or comments that people send to me. But I'll leave you for now with some final shots of the layout in action. Wish you, as always, happy modelling and look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye for now.